edition of Did You Know Doctor Who? What you may not know about Doctor Who. Because we're in the 60s, I decided for the next few stories, we're going to have a look at an entire season's worth of stories from the 6th Doctor era. In fact, it's one long story known as The Trial of the Timelord. And to start off The Trial of the Timelord, let's have a look at its first story, The Mysterious Planet. I hope you enjoy. The idea for The Trial of the Timelord stemmed from several production changes to Doctor Who, such as a reduction screen time for the season and instruction from the BBC One controller Michael Grade that the series needed to contain less violence and more humour. As I sort of alluded to in my Revelation of the Daleks Did You Know Doctor Who episode, the original series production was to include the following stories: The Nightmare Fair, The Ultimate Evil, Mission to Magnus, Yellow Fever and How to Cure It, In the Hollows of Time, and finally, The Children of January. The idea of The Trial of the Time Lord was to present things like A Christmas Carol, with stories set in the past, present and future. This is the last story commissioned by Robert Holmes before he passed away. Ironically, this story is very similar to his first story, The Crotons. The opening model shot of the Time Lord space station where the trial is held throughout the season was the most expensive model shot from the classic series run, costing £8,000. Roger Berreley, who voiced the role of Davro, was originally supposed to be wearing the robot costume and physically play the role, but it was realised that the costume would not fit Berreley's 6'4" frame. Therefore, a special effects assistant, Paul McGuinness, who helped design the costume, was called in to physically play Davro, while Berreley spoke his lines off camera. Graham Harper was asked to direct, but was not free. The fourth part overran, so to compensate, several segments were removed or trimmed, including some material from the courtroom. This included what would have been a second trial scene in which the Valeyard observes the Doctor revealing confidential Gallifreyan information to Perry, and the Inquisitor asks the Doctor why he visited Ravalox in the first place. A later loss was the Valeyard's pronouncement that Humker and Trandall would have repaired the system problem themselves were it not for the Doctor's interference, and the Doctor noting that the situation on Ravalox had endangered the entire universe. Joan Sims hated her time during filming. Colin Baker also disliked the story and hated the script, stating he hated the junkyard rail yard remarks. Outside of filming, Colin Baker, Tony Shelby, and Joan Sim had a pudding eating competition. Baker won after the other two gave in after 3 puddings. Another person who actually hated the story was Jonathan Powell. In an unusually detailed commentary, he took issue with the slow reveal of the trial scenario, the lack of clarity as to the nature of the crisis on Ravalox, and the extent of the Doctor's involvement in its resolution. Most frustratingly for John Nathan Turner, Powell seemed to contradict Michael Grade, that humour feature more prominently in season 23, reserving some of his most stinging criticism for the elements such as the Doctor's taunting of the Valeyard and the comedic banter between Glitz and Dibber. Robert Holmes was deeply hurt by these criticisms. Adam Blackwood kept the costume of Balazar, which he wears at home for DIY. Adam Blackwood and Tom Chadbon found it difficult to look at each other because they thought their costumes were hilarious. Working titles for the story included Wasteland and Robots of Ravalox. It was Glenn McCoy who came up with the idea of the Doctor being on trial. The Doctor chooses to be his own lawyer. Colin Baker had studied to become a solicitor before deciding to become an actor. Eartha Kitt was offered the Joan Sims role. And that is it for today. I hope you enjoyed. That is the first of the trials. The Mysterious Planet is, in my opinion, an incredibly boring and bad story. I don't usually do bad stories on Did You Know Doctor Who because I just think it's a waste of time talking about a story or giving out facts for stories which suck, which is why there's barely any 13th Doctor stories here. But The Mysterious Planet, and for the sake of this Trial of the Time Lord season, The Mysterious Planet is a bad story. It is incredibly boring and lifeless. The story is something that we've seen sort of a million times before. It feels very much like a classic Who story, ironically. It feels like it's something that was from the 3rd Doctor's era, and it somehow made its way over here, and it just isn't entertaining. The humour aspect of it, I can see some of it, but obviously I'm not a huge fan of the humour aspect to it. It was kind of strange seeing like how nice the 6th Doctor is towards Perry in this story, considering how horrible he was beforehand. That always takes me off guard, but obviously they were trying to fix the criticisms of the previous stories, and I think what really sucks is the fact that we lost out on some interesting ideas, such as the Nightmare Fair, where the Celestial Toymaker would have made a reappearance, which looked like an interesting story. It looked like an interesting idea. We didn't get that. Instead, we got this, and this is an absolutely terrible start to the trial. Imagine watching this full season. This is how it starts, and this is just a weak beginning, especially because the next few episodes aren't as bad at all, and I actually think this is the weakest of the trial. This story is boring, it is lifeless, it is a story that we've seen a million times before in Doctor Who. It is bad. It is a bad story, and I would recommend skipping it, but if you want to watch the trial of the Time Lord, you kind of need to watch this story, unfortunately. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Did You Know Doctor Who, and I'll see you for the next trial next time.